Hello guys and welcome back to FatbossTV. This video is the first of many where we're going to have a first look approach at the class changes that is hitting every single spec in the game next expansion. In these previews we're not going to be going super in depth, but hopefully deep enough just to show you guys how your favorite spec and class is working right now on the alpha, and therefore potentially how it will work on live servers next summer. In these videos, we'll be going over all the abilities that you may have lost or gained, mastery changes, talent changes, and ultimately how your artifact will impact on your class. Now for this first video, we're going to start off with Mistweaver Monks. Now as it stands right now on live servers, Mistweaver Monks are your raid healer. They have the hots that can coat the entire raid. You press one button and every single person that has a hot on them gets healed for a flat amount. That's how Renewing Mist and Uplift work. It's the bread and butter, it's been like that forever, and it works. Blizzard decided that they don't like that, and they've completely removed Uplift. Renewing Mist still stands, but it works slightly different. We'll cover that in a moment. But Uplift is gone. Completely gone, never going back. See you later, Uplift. And they haven't really replaced it with anything that seems like it could be as good as Uplift. But we'll cover this in just a moment. On top of this, they've completely removed Chi. This means that you no longer have to track your Chi. All you need to do is just track your mana. To add, they've also removed the Mist and Fist Weaving stances, and with this they removed Jab and Touch of Death. You still have Tiger Palm and you still have Blackout Kick as well as Rising Sun Kick, and those three abilities work slightly differently now. One thing I think we can all agree on though, which they've done correctly, is that they've completely removed our mastery and replaced it with something else. We no longer spawn useless orbs, and instead instantly you'll heal a target for a set amount that scales with our mastery on a targeted spell. So if you cast a heal directly at a player, you'll also give them a burst of healing as you apply that heal. And you'll get a better idea of how that works with certain spells in just a moment. And because the mastery's gone, they actually got rid of Detonate Chi, so you don't need to explode your orbs, even though no one did that anyway. Nimble Brune's gone, your Taunt is gone, your Interrupt is gone, you no longer have your Spear Hand Strike, Fortifying Brew is gone, Expel Harm is gone, Mana Tea as you know it is gone, Surging Mist is gone. It actually has been replaced by something else that's very, very similar. So after that list, you're probably thinking, well, what do we still have? Well, we still have Armability, which is awesome. I'm so glad they decided to keep this. You still have Roll, and if you want to spec it, you still have Chi Torpedo. They both work the exact same. You still travel the same distances, except Chi Torpedo will now no longer heal people, but to counterbalance that, they made it so it costs no mana. You still have Transcendence. This works the exact same way, still the exact same cooldown. As I said earlier, you still do have Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, and Rising Sun Kick. Tiger Palm no longer gives you the armor penetration buff, and instead just deals flat damage. And this ability has no cooldown. Blackout Kick also, like Tiger Palm, no longer gives the buff anymore, and still just deals flat amount of damage. This has a 2.5 second cooldown. And Rising Sun Kick no longer has any charges, and instead is now a flat 10-second cooldown. The Rising Sun Kick hits really, really hard. But there is a new passive that is in play on your character. You have something called Teaching of the Monastery, and how this works is that every time you do a Tiger Palm, it increases the damage of your Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick by 20%. And on top of this, Blackout Kick actually has a 30% chance to reset the cooldown of Rising Sun Kick. So you're probably asking, well, why does any of this matter? Well, ultimately it doesn't matter that much because you can no longer generate Mana Tea through Fist Weaving. However, there are points sometimes when you are in a raid or in a 5-man where you want to do damage, and you do a lot of damage. When we was doing the 5-man Halls of Valor recently, it does I was doing a fair amount of damage. Unfortunately, there isn't recount or anything on the alpha, so I couldn't really tell. But comparing it to the damage that our Fire Mage was doing in the group, his Pyros were hitting for about 40k, 30k. My Rising Sun Kick was critting for about, 60, 70k. So there we go. And your fourth damaging spell is Spinning Crane Kick. This will no longer heal whatsoever. It will only ever deal damage. And again, it deals a lot of damage. You still have Dispel, you still have your Life Cocoon, and you still have Revival. They work the exact same. And you still have Soothing Mist. But this ability is now a passive, and you're probably scratching your heads. Bear with me for 1 second. Now, after you've casted a targeted heal on a player, you'll cast Soothing Mist forever. And your statue, which we'll talk about in a moment, will also mimic the effect. And you can also talent Soothing Mist to increase its healing by 30%, but also allow you to cast it while you're moving. So this means you can target someone, do a single spot heal on that target, and then cast Soothing Mist on them while you're running around in circles. Sounds pretty broken to me in PvP, but there we go. The way that this ability starts is really weird. At first, I must admit, I absolutely hated it. It feels completely unnatural for you to cast this ability without you actually pressing a single bind. But I'm not going to lie, after doing the dungeon, it definitely grew on me. It's completely free when it's being channeled, so you don't have to worry about mana management. And it's actually a very, very strong heal. If you combine it with your statue, you can actually spot heal for a lot. Now, Mistweaver still have Enveloping Mist, but with Chi gone, this ability now costs mana, but it has no cooldown, so you can spam it as much as you like, which is nice, I guess. On the alpha, it actually heals for a shit ton, but it does cost quite a lot of mana. But if you make it so the heal is effective, so if you heal a target that's very low and you just leave them and let the hot top that character by itself, it's actually very, very mana efficient because it is such a strong heal. And there are ways of increasing the duration of it and its potency and stuff like that. We'll talk about that in a moment when we cover the talents. And as I mentioned earlier, Renewing Mist is still there as well. However, now it's only a hot that you can place on a single target, just like a rejuve. It lasts 20 seconds and it has an 8-second cooldown. But the way that it works now is that if that target that it is healing is on 100% health and the tick overheals, it will then just jump to the most injured party member, but the duration of it won't be refreshed. It will stay at whatever duration it was. Another thing that Renewing Mist does is that every time it heals, it has a 4% chance to make Vivify heal for 50% more. And you're probably wondering what the hell is Vivify. So let's move on and talk about the new spells. So this spell is a short cast that spot heals your target and 2 injured targets nearby. This already, when not buffed by Renewing Mist, already heals for a large amount and is a great spot heal. The range on the 2 injured targets isn't actually completely clear, but while healing the new 5-man, it felt like it was a really far distance. It could even be 40 yards, so there we go. Pretty decent heal. One heal that isn't decent is the replacement for Surging Mists, which is a Fuse. This is just a super short cast that spot heals a single target, and that's it. This ability just seems really poorly scaled. It says that it's fast and efficient. Well, it's certainly fast, but I wouldn't say it's efficient. You would never press this if it hits live servers the way it is now, unless you were doing it purely just to generate Soothing Mists. So there we go. It's a bit of a shit ability. Doesn't heal for much right now. Another new spell that's been added is Shylun's Gift. This is actually from your artifact weapon. This is just a spot heal again on a very short cast, very similar to a Fuse, but actually heals for a decent amount. But it does have a 30-second cooldown, but it doesn't cost any mana. And sadly, it doesn't proc Soothing Mist, but there we go. Now, the ability that they've added that I guess is to replace Uplift is an ability called Essence Font. Now, this is a 2.5-second channel that makes your character spray out bolts that heal up to 6 targets within 25 yards. And each time a player gets hit by one of the bolts, it also applies a hot that lasts 6 seconds. To me, this ability just seems like a Rushing Jade Wind that just so happens to have a slightly larger range and applies a hot. But that said, you can actually do Rushing Jade Wind beforehand and then use Essence Font immediately afterwards. And if you do that and everyone's within like 6 yards of it, so they get the effect of the Rushing Jade Wind as well as the Essence Font, you're going to do a fucking crazy amount of healing, like a ridiculous amount of AoE healing. But the only issue with it is its mana. Essence Font is your second most expensive spell, and of course Rushing Jade Wind is your most expensive spell. Right now on the alpha, getting Spirit Gear is really difficult. And as a result, mana expensive spells are actually really hard to press consistently. But that said, Essence Font is actually an extremely mana efficient heal, if nothing overheals. But if you put that in a raiding environment, half the time hots overheal. So yeah, if it's a good replacement for Uplift, who knows, because we haven't seen the damage in a raid yet, but I assume not. Now, I've left out Thunder Focus T for last. Even though this is not a new ability, it is on live servers. On alpha, it's completely different. It's still a 45-second cooldown, but its effect now triggers all of your major abilities. So with Renewing Mist, instead of giving it 5 charges, it just makes it so it has absolutely no cooldown. So you press it once, and then you can press it again immediately afterwards. It increases the healing from a Fuse by 200%, which is absolute shit because a Fuse is terrible. It could be 300 or even 400%. It would still be shit. It makes it so your next Enveloping Mist cast is instant, which is actually a decent spot heal when you consider your mastery as well. Getting that like little bit of burst and then that massive hot afterwards. Very, very strong in 5-mans. It also makes your Vivify cost absolutely no mana, so if you're in a situation where perhaps you're low on mana or you just want to try and conserve mana as much as you possibly can, then you could, I guess you could use it there. But the most interesting application of a Thunder Focus T is on your Essence Font. It allows you to cast the ability while moving, which is insanely useful in fights where a lot of AoE healing is needed, but you've got to do a load of moving to maybe avoid an ability or like maybe, I mean, if you're going to put it in an example, maybe Gore Fiend, maybe you have to run out to go soak one of the ghosts. It could be really, really strong. I think in most cases you would probably use it for that. However, being able to instantly apply Enveloping Mist on someone could be really, really useful, as well as maybe putting extra Renewing Mists out so you get more Vivify procs. Who knows? But yeah, pretty interesting. So the talent tree has also had a complete rework. Some of the talents have been flat out removed, some of the talents have actually moved lines, and some have been merged into new ones. Momentum has been merged into Chi Torpedo, that's the speed increase that you get after you roll, or in this case, after you Chi Torpedo. Chi Waves is completely gone. Power Strikes, Ascension, and Chi Brew completely removed. The level 60 CC line has remained more or less the same. Charging Oxwave has actually been replaced with an ability that's very, very similar. The level 75 defensive line is more or less the exact same. Rushing Jadewind has actually been renamed to Refreshing Jadewind. Swen has been replaced by Chi-Ji, and Chi Torpedo has been replaced by Jade Statue. With your level 100 line, the Breath of the Serpent, Chi Explosion, and Pool of Mist has been completely removed and replaced with 3 new talents. So here are how the talents look right now on the alpha. On your level 15 line, you have Chi Burst, Zen Pulse, and Manatee. Chi Burst literally works the exact same. Zen Pulse has been reworked slightly. Now it pulses around a single player, dealing damage, and any damage that is dealt is healed directly to that player. So this is an ability that is likely you would use on, say, your tank. If he's tanking like 10 mobs or something, you throw the Zen Pulse up on him, the Zen Pulse deals damage to all the 10 mobs, and while it's dealing damage, it's going to heal your tank for a shit ton as well. Pretty interesting ability, and it does have only a 15-second cooldown, so maybe you'll start seeing this in raids. However, Manatee is probably the one that you're going to use. All this does is reduce the mana cost of your spells by 50%, for 10 seconds, and this is a 60-second cooldown, and there's not much more to say about that. Just allows you to use more spells. Now on the level 30 line, you have Chi Torpedo. Already we've gone over this. It travels the same distance, but it no longer heals, and it no longer costs mana. Tiger's Lust, again, it just applies a movement speed increase. That hasn't changed, and Celerity hasn't changed either. It just reduces your roll cooldown by 5 seconds and gives an extra charge. On the 45 line, Life Cycles makes it so your Enveloping Mist reduces the mana cost of your next Vivify by 30% and vice versa. So I was actually playing around with this quite a lot in the 5-man dungeon, and you can actually sort of make some form of rotation where you can just Enveloping Mist, Vivify, Enveloping Mist, Vivify, Enveloping Mist, and just keep going from one to the other, and then every 8 seconds just using Renewing Mist for even more Vivify procs. You can actually bust out a lot of healing, especially in a 5-man environment, by doing this. Crane's Grace makes it so when a target that has Renewing Mist on them drops below 30% health, Renewing Mist is instantly consumed and that target is healed for a large amount, and the amount is pretty substantial. I don't think this is a talent you'd use in PvE necessarily. I think having that Renewing Mist up on that target for a longer period of time to get more Vivify procs is more important than instantly healing them for a large amount. It's a little bit situational and it does depend on what's going on, but most of the time I don't think this is the talent that you choose. And the last talent in this line is Mist Wrap. This increases the duration of your Enveloping Mist by 2 seconds, and it increases the healing by 20%. This is actually really, really strong considering how much you may well be using Enveloping Mist, especially on targets that need a lot of spot healing, such as your tanks or maybe someone with a really nasty debuff. Enveloping Mist already does a lot of healing. To add 20% and an extra 2 seconds on it is really, really strong. Now your 60 line is very similar to Life. You still have Ring of Peace, but how this works now, instead of like silencing enemies nearby, it will now just knock them back if they start casting, if they're within the ring, and that's it. Pretty simple. Song of Chi-Ji spawns like a cloud that moves slowly towards enemies, and if enemies are hit by it, they're actually put to sleep for 20 seconds. So this replaces your charging Ox thingy. Don't know if it's better, maybe it is, who knows. And the last one is Leg Sweep, exactly the same, just stuns all targets around you for 5 seconds. The majority of the time in most raiding situations, you are going to be using that Leg Sweep. Your 75 talents are actually exactly the same as Live in every single way. Healing Auxiliaries will still do 15% of your maximum health. Diffuse Magic is still your flat 90% magic damage reduction. Dampen Armor is just your 50% damage reduction on the next 3 attacks. And that is it for that line. On the 90 line, you now have Refreshing Jadewind, which is Rushing Jadewind renamed. It does cost slightly less mana than Live servers, which I guess is a nice thing, but in every other way it's the same. Now Swen has been removed and replaced by Chi-Ji. And this guy makes a little bit more sense for Mistweavers than what Swen does. This guy will actually heal people. It just darts around and heals people. It lasts for 45 seconds and it's a 3-minute cooldown. On the alpha, it does seem really buggy. I actually decided not to use it because of how buggy the movement was. It was a little bit off-putting. And the last one in this line is your Summon Jade Serpent statue. Now, the statue works the same way in the sense that it is a 10-second cooldown and you could just place it on the ground and it will heal targets. but it will no longer heal targets based on the damage you're dealing. Instead, it simply will cast Soothing Mist on whatever player you started casting Soothing Mists on. If you stop casting Soothing Mist, the statue will ignore that and just continue to cast it on that player. It lasts around 10 seconds or so every 10 seconds you will need to do a spot heal if you decide to use this talent, just to make sure your statue is actually doing something. Now on the 100 line you have Mistwalk. This is an ability that allows you to dash to a friendly target and just heal them for quite a large amount. It does have 2 charges and it has a 20-second cooldown per charge. This is a talent that you would use if you needed to travel across the entire room in like a very small amount of time, because you could like Mistwalk, roll, and then Transcendence or something, or even Chi Torpedoes if you wanted to add them in there instead of rolls. But yeah, very, very interesting ability, but I don't think it's something you'll be using in raids, because if you compare it to, say, the next talent, which is Focus Thunder, this makes it so your Thunder Focus T now empowers your next 3 spells rather than just 1. This means, as we were talking earlier about how this ability works, if you wanted to use 3 Essence Fonts in a row and move at the exact same time, well, with this talent you can. I'm not sure what fight would require you to do that, but who knows what's coming. So that is a very interesting talent. But your last talent is Soothing Elegance. This allows your Soothing Mist to be cast while you're moving, as well as increasing its healing by 30%. And I think that also applies to the Jade statue. If you've got that up, that will also heal for 30% more. So yeah, pretty crazy. Soothing Mist already heals for quite a lot. With this talent, your spot healing will be absolutely crazy on certain targets if you get both Soothing Mists on them. But yeah, being able to cast while moving is brilliant. So they're all the talents that you get directly from your class. However, your artifact also gives you even more talents. Now on the alpha right now, my artifact isn't progressed enough. It's going to take ages to do it through the dungeons and everything to actually get it progressed enough to show you them all like active. But most of them are kind of passives and don't really give you anything too interesting. Like you get a flat damage reduction, you make it so you increase the healing of your main abilities. Life Cocoon gets a bigger absorb, but there are some interesting talents, such as Life Cocoon also applying Renewing Mist and Enveloping Mist when you apply it to a player, which you could argue is like sort of like a mini Lay on Hands. Not only are you saving that target by putting a big absorb on them, but Life Cocoon also increases the amount of periodic healing that target receives by 50%. Add 2 fucking hots at the exact same time, and those hots are going to heal them up pretty damn quick. So that one's pretty decent. There's also one that makes it so Renewing Mist, the duration of it is increased by 8 seconds. This is simply just going to give you more Vivify procs, and Renewing Mist, to be fair, does heal for quite a lot. It does give that player consistent healing, and 8 extra seconds, that's going to be a 28-second hot. That's pretty damn broken. That's going to heal that target a lot over that duration. There's also an enhancement to Revival where it makes it after you've pressed the button. Every single player that was hit by that Revival also gets a hot for 30% of the amount healed over 6 seconds. In most situations, this probably won't be that good unless Revival doesn't instantly top that target, which towards the early stages of the expansion will probably be the case. If it ever gets to the stage where Revival just instantly tops everyone, the hot is just going to overheal to high hell, unless you're in like a constant AoE situation, such as like, I don't know, the Feast of Souls and Gorefiend or something like that. So yeah, potentially that could be really strong. There's another talent that makes it so Renewing and Enveloping Mist has a chance to create a Mist of Wisdom. Not quite sure what this is, but I assume it's just going to be a spot heal on random players. There's also something called Celestial Breath. This happens when you activate your Thunder Focus T. You'll just spray out healing that heals for everyone within 12 yards of you for a crazy amount over 5 seconds. And because it's activated by Thunder Focus T, you can use this every 45 seconds. So that just gives you another reason to stack on top of your monk. And on top of that, of course, you've got Shaylin's Gift, which is the spot heal. And you also have something called Spirit Tether, which makes it so you slow all targets within 8 yards of your Transcendent Spirit. Not sure where that's going to get any use, unless they bring like a Cho'Gao style fight back where you have to slow a load of ads. But yeah, there we go. So there are all the abilities, there are all the talents, there's everything. So how does this all look while you're actually playing? Well, in 5-mans, it's an improvement over the old Mistweaver. The gameplay experience is much better. Monks on live servers right now, they do have good spot healing, but it requires you to build chi, which can make it a little bit slow. And to add, while you are spot healing, no one is receiving any other healing apart from like Renewing Mist ticks or maybe some heals from your statue. And while you're AoE healing, so while you're spamming Uplift, no one's receiving any good spot healing whatsoever. I mean, you could argue that the Hellfire Citadel 4 set is a good spot heal, which is totally correct, but it's not built into the core skill set of the class. It's not something that works, say, in challenge modes. And that's the big picture here. 5-man's next expansion are going to be important, so much so that you're actually able to get raid quality gear from them if you do them well enough. And as we know right now, on live servers, monks aren't the best 5-man healers whatsoever. They're not designed well for 5-man healing. And pretty much the only thing you've got going for you as a monk in 5-man instances is pretty much what do you spend your chi on? Enveloping Mist or spot heals, or uplift to try and top the entire group? On Alpha, you can have your Renewing Mist up on 3 targets permanently. Renewing Mist actually ticks for a lot. It's a very strong rejuve essentially, and this gives you your Vivify procs. And you can use Vivify to spot heal 3 targets. This feels way more fluid than spamming Uplift. And if you decide to run the Life Cycles talent, it's very efficient for you to swap between the Enveloping Mist and Vivify. And in the situation where the entire group needs healing, you can use Essence Font, which of course also applies a hot. And then you can just go back to your rotation of Enveloping Mist and Vivify. Having this new Zen Pulse is also really nice because you can just throw it on your tank and then heal the rest of the group. That's a really nice touch. And one thing I think I overlooked slightly, especially in a 5-man situation, is actually running with Soothing Elegance. While you're running from one trash pack to another trash pack, you can still continually heal people because you can cast and move your Soothing Mists. So like, let's just say like your tank is low after the pack, or maybe someone still has like a dot on them or something. You can just spot heal and run towards the next pack while casting Soothing Mist on them. That is really, really nice. I'd say that monks overall, although it's a little bit unfair because we haven't seen the other healers in action yet because they're just simply not available, it would not surprise me if monks become one of the stronger 5-man healers for challenge modes with the new skill set that they're actually getting. But that is where my confidence stops. In raids, with Renewing Mist no longer on the entire group and having your uplift gone, your group healing is going to be 0 unless you're in the situation where everyone is stacked and you can just spam Rushing Jadewind and Essence Font. And at the start of the expansion, with the mana cost these things have right now, there's no fucking way you're going to spam these for a 6 or a 7 minute long fight. You can argue that sure, Vivify heals 3 targets, but that's a lot of cast to top an entire raid of 20 or 30 people. The whole stacking situation could definitely be improved if they increase the range of Essence Font to 40 yards. But then again, what sort of gameplay is that where AoE damage is coming in and all you do is just spam Essence Font over and over again? At least right now on live servers, you have to play the mini game of managing your chi to actually press uplift. With all that said, it does depend on how the damage is going to be in raids. At the start of Warlords, they said that they wanted healers to worry about mana, which, to be honest, was the case for the majority of, say, Highmaul and Blackrock Foundry. They said that burst damage was going to be a thing of the past, which generally was the case unless you're talking about Butcher, which was the second boss they released in the entire fucking expansion. That was a bit of a bad idea. And they also said that you're more likely to see people on lower health pools for longer periods of time and that panic healing wasn't necessary. You didn't need to like get people back up to 100% health as soon as possible like it was in Siege of Orgrimmar. And they executed that quite well over the course of Warlords, but as a new tier is released and your character becomes more powerful as a result from all the new gear he gets, they have to increase the damage that goes out in the raid because that's the only way that they keep the game challenging for healers. So it's just gone straight back to burst healing in Hellfire Citadel. It's not as extreme as, say, Siege of Orgrimmar, but it's still very, very similar. Now, they've not yet stated what healing is going to be like in these starting raids coming up in Legion, so maybe it's a little bit unfair for me to criticize monks from this angle. But if we are going to assume it's going to be the same at the start of the expansion where damage isn't bursty, monks will be fine, but I think in later tiers, they're going to struggle with the current skill set. However, with the new artifact system, they do have the ability to like add new spells or enhance current abilities in one way or another to compensate for that, as well as any like class items or legendaries or force sets. So how monks are right now with this particular skill set, the perfect situation is if you can stack up on every single fight and just AoE heal like it's Dragon Soul again, or if raid damage is low and instead you're needed to spot heal a small amount of targets. If it's the situation where you're forced to be spread, the raid damage is high, and spot healing isn't overly needed, then I think they're going to struggle in comparison to the other healers. But that's just how I feel monks are right now. I mean, perhaps I'm wrong, perhaps I'm right. The only way we'll ever really find out is when Blizzard give us a little bit more information about how healing is actually going to be in raids, or at least their idea of how healing is going to be in raids. But that's all I've got time for in this video. If you did enjoy this little preview, please do drop us down a like, and leave us a comment if you want us to cover another class. The plan is to cover them all. Let us know which one you want us to do next, and we shall see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.